What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We have a mini episode exercise for you before we have 2 megapods coming out where we cover the entire Western Conference to wrap up a series we've been doing. But we decided to take a look at the NBA playoff pressure index, where we're looking at teams that are under the most pressure to not only get into the playoffs or have a specific seed, maybe not get in by way of the play-in, but who's going to be under the most pressure once they get there because of what that means for their short and long-term future. And we're going to separate them into tiers where if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that we have the nice little tier maker up there. Grant and I will just kind of go back and forth with suggesting the teams and we'll sort them from there. If you are on if you're a fan of, let's say, the Charlotte Hornets, the D tier, you're under no pressure. Congratulations, because you're not going anywhere. The Pistons, you're not under pressure to close the season either, even though there's probably stuff that your fans want to see. So I'm just going to automatically throw those teams in there as Gramp. There, let's see what the YouTube captions do with that one, Grant. And even just like the Nets, it's just like, yeah, that ship is sailed. They need to figure out what they're doing. So this is just about teams that are playing playoff. I don't want to say eligible, but hopeful still.
Yeah. You're going to definitely also want to, you got to lead off with the most important question, right?
Yeah, I was about to. And you were so excited to talk about the Washington Wizards that, Grant, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing so well that I'm just trying to preempt your question, I guess. Yeah, I was going to say, you better get the Blazers and the Wizards in there. Sorry, Jazz. That's too bad. Raptors, Spurs. Who else are we missing that needs to go in there?
I think so. Maybe we should start with like some of the play-in-ish teams then, where it's like I would specifically. Well, so let me start off, and we'll just wrap 2 into 1. This Atlanta Chicago stuff. How much pressure you want to start with Atlanta?
Yeah, I think. I guess really you should decide it based on like which has got the most like blow up potential if things go the wrong way and the Bulls don't blow it up. So I guess Atlanta is probably under more pressure than the Bulls. But it's still like, I don't know, nobody expects anything out of them, right? Let's go with like the B tier for them, like kind of in the middle, I'd say.
Yeah, because it's like, what are you going to learn about this team if they're going to be a play-in team? And let's say if Trae Young, and is like, and everybody's healthy, what is actually, if they lose, like, what is it? Is it materially going to change what you thought about the Trae Young, DeJounte Murray pairing, or whether they should move Trae Young if you fall into that camp or not?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Let's take the Bulls, though, comparatively. Less pressure on the Bulls than the Hawks, right?
Yes. And I would agree. If anything, although if you wanted to, so I'll put them in the C tier, the Bulls. S, by the way, is the most urgent pressure. And then there's A.
Pressure.
Yeah. Then there's A, which is lots of pressure. B, the Hawks, they're in the middle. Shocker, the Hawks in the middle. C, and then D, where there's just no pressure, where there might be, I think there will be some good teams that end up in the no pressure tier, just to be clear. So with the Bulls, though, let's galaxy brain this for a minute. You're almost worried that what if they just outperform expectations and then this emboldens the front office to run it back anyway? Because I think fans want them to blow it up. And so are they under pressure to suck?
It's more like reverse pressure. Like this is the only team where it would be bad if they did well.
But I think it's when it comes to identity long term, the Hawks definitely have more at stake because there could just be sort of this organic pivot point for Chicago where what if, Zach LaVine's injured and they might trade him. And then what if DeMar just leaves in free agency? And so like some of this stuff is not out of their hands necessarily, but it's just not as higher stakes as, well, is Trae Young the right best player for the Hawks? Can it work with DeJounte Murray? What are they doing up front with, Jalen Johnson's injured now, but you have Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella. How's that all going to work? Is DeAndre Hunter, is he just a career 6 man now? So they have higher stakes questions, I think.
Yeah. All right. So there's a team that's really like catching my eye that I want to put next to the Bulls in the minimal pressure, but just above all these lottery teams. Can you guess which team that is?
Ooh, the Rockets?
It's the Rockets. Oh, nice. Look at this. Look at these.
You said next to the Bulls?
Yeah, right there. Yeah, because like I don't know. It's kind of the ahead of schedule argument. They're super young still. Şengün may or may not be healthy enough to play and contribute. So you kind of have that as an excuse. Like it would be disappointing after if they make the play-in. Like they're still just on the edge of it as we're recording this on the outside. But the momentum, like for them, has been very, very, very positive of late. So it'd be disappointing to fall short if after kind of having this late season surge. But it's like nobody expected anything out of them anyway, and they've already just exceeded what the most optimistic outlook really could have had in store for them. So if they get into the plan and they get bounced, like nobody's going to care. The future's still so bright for them that it's not a big deal, right? Like I feel like that's the right spot for them.
I'm almost wondering, like, don't they belong in the no pressure tier? What is actually at stake for them? Is it just kind of figuring out, because they did spend some money on veterans this past summer, that would be nice to at least make the play in, and you owe your pick anyway this year. So let's make sure it's not, too. So I'm just like curious, like, what pressure are they actually under? I think you could argue because of the way they perform defensively, because of Şengün's emergence. Uh, like, should they be in the no pressure tier?
It feels weird to put them down there with those, because those other the teams in the absolute bottom level are just a very specific type of team. Like most of them have
So
stopped
you're
trying to
operating under
win.
the assumption that if you can still make the play in, basically, you have to be under some semblance of
I
pressure.
kind of think so. And just
Okay.
specifically with the Rockets too, because they've looked so good of late, it would be a little disappointing, I think, certainly to Rockets fans if they didn't make it, but not to the point, it would just be outweighed massively by the optimism that everybody has about them. I just can't put them next to, like, they're just not the same as the Spurs and the Blazers and the Wizards and the Pistons to me.
Do we put their alternative logo, which I keep forgetting I have in my logo folder because I think it's cool, this rocket? We'll put the alternative
Yeah, there
rocket
you
at the
go.
bottom there.
Split the difference.
So my next team is, and I'm kind of fascinated by this one, and I'm gonna go here. Grant, where do the Knicks belong?
Oh man. Well, on the one hand, you've got the injuries as an excuse. I think
Mitchell
kind of
Robinson back though.
he is back, giving you some cover. But I think coming at their absolute best, so obviously they're going to make the playoffs and should be the top 4 seed. I'm looking at the standings now. It's not a given. Seems likely though. I think they belong. I'd still put them. You can't go lower than the Hawks, so they're at least next to the Hawks in the middle tier, the B tier there.
I
I
think I think that's right, if you would allow me to interject, because
Yeah, I don't
the
feel
injuries
comfortable moving them up.
the injuries do give them cover, and they're not, right now, Julius Randle and OG Anunoby are two of your three most important players. I know Dante DiVincenzo's been great. Same with Hartenstein, same with Josh Hart. But the peak version of the Knicks, your three most important players are OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, and Jalen Brunson. That gives you cover, and you're not in imminent danger of losing any of them. I know OG's a free agent, but he's going to resign. I think where it gets complicated, and you could make the case for if they were healthy, is okay. That Bojan Bogdanovic Alec Burks trade, which we both very much supported, it's been an abject failure because
Yeah,
of how little they're using them. And part of that is Deuce McBride's emergence, but that doesn't really explain the Bogdanovic stuff. That gives you some cover for the Burks happenings. And now it's at the point where, okay, we still have these picks to trade, but no more blue chip prospects, I guess, unless Deuce McBride is really like, what if Steph Curry was the defensive player of the year type deal. So like, but so I think it's right, because you also, to be under pressure is a form of respect. So this team is good enough to where it's okay. It's good that they have like a very fully functioning, coherent front office now, but they've been kind of waiting to be a caps lock contender for still a minute. And now you need to make that jump. And this is supposed to be the year that progresses, especially after making the kinds of trades that you did to
yeah.
get Bojan, to get Alec Burks, to get OG Anunoby, of course. They've just been so banged up to still even be in contention for, like, because look at a team like the Heat that have been so banged up and where they're at, and they have one of the best head coaches in the league.
Right. All right. So here's where I want to go. I feel like I need parameters. We need to bookend this. So I want to pick a team that has maximum pressure, just so we kind of have, because we got all the teams at the bottom that set the no pressure. I think the easiest maximum pressure pick has got to be Phoenix, because of the financial situation they're in, because of the total lack of draft picks, because of the 3-star setup. They just have no outs. And things have not gone as expected or as hoped this year. Part of that's been health, but this is interesting. We gave the Knicks cover because of health reasons. We're not giving it to the Suns, right? That does not alleviate the pressure in the same way. So every situation is different. The Phoenix's all-in gambit is just like, well, yeah, you gambled on guys that might get hurt. So did Bradley Beal specifically, and you got a thin roster because that's the only one you could build around him. that ups the pressure. That's not like, that doesn't diminish it. That doesn't give them any kind of reprieve. So I think Phoenix is the first, like, okay, this is it. It has to be this year, because next year and the years certainly down the line are like, nothing is promised. So I think they've got to be among the handful of teams with the most pressure.
I think I would argue that Phoenix is single-handedly under the most pressure of any team in the league. Because it's like, you can argue, well, look at the timelines of Steph Curry and LeBron in those instances, and maybe we should just go to those teams next. But I think you could probably let's actually go here. I would have the Clippers in the S tier as well. Paul George is going to be a free agent. It seems like there's some weird standoff going on with his extension. At some point, if it just hasn't happened, if you get bounced early or if you're not healthy enough for some reason leading into the playoffs, this is the year, it feels like, to where if they don't make, I would say if they don't get to a game 7 of the semifinals, and that's like the bare minimum, it ends up just being a disaster. And it's not merely, well, then what do we do about the Paul George stuff? Do we have the stomach to go into the second apron? I actually, just knowing how rich Steve Ballmer is, that's not the main equation. It's, well, how much money do we pay James Harden and how do we improve the team from here under the stringent trade and free agent tools that we're going to have at our disposal?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the ways you could delineate teams that belong in the top tier is like, this might be the last best chance.
Yes.
And for the Clippers too, it, like, a failure would be a referendum on like a half decade's worth of seasons that just did not work out. So like, they've got it, they're kind of getting it both ways. What about Milwaukee? Doesn't Milwaukee kind of have a last best chance vibe to them too? I mean, you make the Dame Lillard trade, you break up a core that, like, look, you had the first round elimination last year. So, you fire the coach and then you fire another coach. But just, hold on, by virtue of the fact that the Bucks are on their third coach in like a few months, they got to be at the top.
And also, it's just, look at you could look at it but we're not giving the same credence to Phoenix, where it's, well, they tried to implement such a huge star that maybe it takes a year for this to figure out. It's, well, Damian Lillard is 33 and right. Brook Lopez is old, and Chris Middleton been playing well offensively since his return, but he's on the older end, has a bunch of lower body injuries in his rear view. It's going this core, I would say you're not at the point where Giannis is either going to sustain or maybe get a little bit better each year. Everyone else among the most important players to your team, and I don't know where you consider AJ Green there now, and the Marjon Beauchamp stuff clearly hasn't happened. They're not getting any better. And so I do think they belong in the last best chance crew. And unlike the Clippers, I would say, I think you maybe could you make the case that the Clippers are under less pressure than the Bucks, just because if they really wanted to go let's just say it has to be like dollar for dollar and they can trade one first round pick, they kind of have more tantalizing stuff where if they gave up someone who matters, they could still be a contender. Where with the Bucks, it's, well, were you trading Brook Lopez or Middleton or even Dame and getting better? I don't see that scenario, but they're in the same tier. So I think I agree with you. They need to be in the last best chance kind of category. Let's kind of go to the Golden State Warriors and Lakers, though. You want to start with the Lakers are fascinating.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm obviously, like, the clock ticking with LeBron, free agency with LeBron potentially, like, that's been a major storyline. I think that makes me want to put them in the top tier.
Oh, I hope you don't.
I don't think you can, because, like, they're definitely going to make the play in now, at least, but that wasn't a given. They've been good enough lately to do that. You still have Anthony Davis. You still have some. I mean, how many picks this is putting you on the spot, but they still, because they didn't burn them all, they've got outs. They've got firsts to trade this offseason. I think get up to 3, right? Something
correct,
like that.
And then sprinkling some swaps from there too.
Yeah. So like, yeah, the LeBron thing certainly pressurizes it, but I can't put them. They don't seem quite the same to me as the Suns, Clippers, and Bucks. So I think you got to put them in the currently unoccupied A tier, which is below the top.
Just by virtue of LeBron, like, you're not, it's not even just the free agency stuff. It's, okay, well, what if he's not one of the 10 best players in the NBA at the age of 40?
Yeah, right. Right. I mean, hypothetically, who's to say, why wouldn't he be? I go ahead. It's your turn.
I don't understand what to do with the Warriors, because I think they probably belong in the A tier as well, but they seem under more pressure in regards to the offseason, because even if they make, like, the Lakers, if they make a deep playoff push, they're going to read into that more. Where if the Dubs, if for some reason they get into the play-in, they win a playoff round, maybe they go to a game 7 in the semifinals, or make the conference finals, you cannot possibly go into next season thinking that this is the core with which to move forward. Because as we've talked about, and especially you have harped on, they don't have a reliable second best player on this team. And like the Lakers have that.
Right. Yeah. I think though, one thing the Warriors do have, and look, I don't think a trade is the way to necessarily fix this. But if you put Pajemski and Wiggins in a deal, or you could move Trace Jackson Davis, with a salary, you could trade Moses Moody, you could trade like there, you have the, I guess, flexibility to not lowball, but definitely reduce what Klay Thompson makes next year if he comes back. The Curry timeline is real scary in a weird way. It like feels more frail than LeBron's does, even though LeBron is so much older.
Yeah.
I can't put the Warriors in the absolute top tier because they still sort of have some outs, and Curry is still really great. But the road to improvement is tricky. I still think there are some, so let's put them with the Lakers. I think that feels right, because you can't put them lower than that, but they don't also belong in the like, this is absolutely it tier.
What's kind of muddying my vision of this is that we've seen so much basketball already that I'm kind of the camp of teams have shown us what they are. And so I just don't have expectations for the Warriors.
Right. That's the other thing. Yeah. Nobody seriously thinks they're going to make major noise. That's another factor.
I have an S tier nomination. And
okay.
I think you could maybe argue a little bit. Like if they're in the same tier, so you make a case for any of them, but the Celtics got to be in the S tier because they've first of all killed everybody except for the Nuggets in the regular season, basically. And you did kind of overhaul your roster. You still have outs when you look at pick equity and the value of the actual players under contract, but you've now kind of said, if you get bounced before the conference finals this year, I just like, what is the answer? Okay, well, let's go out and trade for a point guard who can run the crunch time offense when we got to pay Drew Holiday. Do we want to pay Drew Holiday? Or are we extending him? I'm saying I don't think they're going to need to get to a point to answer those questions. But if they do, there's kind of some real trouble because they have outs, but they're so clearly on paper, which should be the second most complete team in the NBA. Because I think Denver 1 to 5 is the most complete team in the NBA. Boston's probably the most complete 1 to 6, 1 to 7, whatever you want to frame it. So they're just by virtue of being this good and being basically, what are they in? They're in first place, and
they're a good bet to win 65 games. You can't win 65 games and then fall short of, like, you got to make the finals, I think, to deliver.
11 games, 11 losses, like better than second place in the East.
Yeah. They got to be up there. It's interesting that you can get to the top tier via a lot of different reasons. Like there's a lot of
though, even if they do bow out, are you going to fall into that? I'm not hot takery camp, but it's because when you look at the salary they would have to move to make trades, it's a little harder to make impact moves without dipping into your top 6 players. But even if they fall really short, I'm still probably going to be team like, no, you need to float this another. Like this team is just too good to say we need to overhaul it.
Run it back. You say it all the time. Jason Tatum's still only 19. Like, I mean, you got all the time in the world. Well, he's going to make $300 million this summer, probably. Yeah, so I think maybe there might be another S tier team. Okay, so let's talk about the Timberwolves. They're no lower than the Lakers Warriors tier, I think, just because the season has been so good. I could be talked into the top tier just because of the looming luxury tax stuff. And the fact that this has basically been the best season in franchise history, although that won't be fully determined until you see what they do in the playoffs. But the idea that like this is a team that will get broken up at some point for financial reasons. We've talked a lot about like it doesn't necessarily need to be until like the end of next year, maybe, if you're really just concerned about the tax. But they got to at least be the A tier, which is next to the Lakers and Warriors. But do you have are you good with that, or do you think there's a case that they belong at the absolute top?
No, I don't. The cat injury too is just, I don't want to be a fan of excuses, and he's had some rough playoff runs. But when we kind of talk about the Warriors not having a clear second best player, the Wolves no longer have like a clear second scorer without Karl Anthony Towns. And so if he's going to miss the first round or try and come back early from the meniscus injury, that needs to be caked into the calculus. And that coupled with the fact they don't have to make first of all, if you're going to own an NBA team, if you're worried about 1 or 2 years of this second apron stuff, maybe you shouldn't be owning an NBA team. But I digress there. Because the decision doesn't have to be made until, I'll say, at the absolute earliest, the 2025 trade deadline, because let's say they underachieve at the start of next season, that lowers the pressure level. That coupled with the Karl Anthony Towns injury for me. And there's also an element of, for the fan base, this is not an insult. If the Wolves win a playoff round, their fans are going to be through the moon. And that should absolutely matter. They should be over the moon. And that should absolutely matter. And so I can't, maybe if Towns was healthy, but like just knowing how brutal the West is and just their previous playoff track record to get to this point after the season you had last year, which was muddied by a bunch of stuff, chemistry, lack of availability from Karl Anthony Towns, to be where you are now, there is at least some level of moral victory here.
Yeah. Why don't
so
you
my nomination here, which I'd be fascinated with for you, where do we put the Kings?
I think you can put the Kings with the Knicks and the Hawks. Couple reasons. They still have outs. They aren't like, I don't think expectations are super high. I think the fan base is generally pretty satisfied. If they're a playoff team, they're certainly going to be that. If they're another first round out, I think that's mildly disappointing, but I think if you're being objective about it, it's probably the expectation. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's lower expectations, but maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm just telling on myself there. But
no, I think they're a season away from being the S or the A tier. And I've kind of come around on this idea that there was no opportunity at the trade deadline to really level up this team. I still, if you want to get to the point of, well, why weren't they the squad that gave up seconds to get Royce O'Neal? That is absolutely fair game. So I don't want to, like, the fact that they didn't do anything at that level is disappointing. But when you look at, I never thought Siakam was a good fit, so why give up the value to get him? And then it's clear that OG Anunoby didn't want to be there, so why would you ever even entertain giving up Keegan Murray in first to get him? That pressure comes leading into this offseason when we now have 2 years worth of information of, okay, yeah, there's some weird stuff this year with the Keegan Murray shooting, the Kevin Huerter shooting, even the De'Aaron Fox stuff from the in-between this year has fallen off, or at least of late it has. But we have 2 seasons worth of information of, well, these are the biggest issues. And for the most part, they're the same biggest issues. So that the pressure is going to kick in the offseason. And it's in a way where it's lower than the Lakers, the Warriors, because Fox and Sabonis are just younger. So you have more time there.
Yeah. What do we do? Denver is just sitting there. And they're the defending champs. I think you and I both agree that they're the most likely team to win the title this year. That's how I feel.
Me too.
I think they are the favorite, right? I don't know. I haven't looked at the betting odds.
I think the Celtics have to be the favorite.
Are they?
I'm sure just based on market, like knowing how that stuff sort of works.
Okay.
They shouldn't be, but I think they are.
So I think like there's the grace period. They won it last year. But there's also the so it's like, I don't know, they could make the conference finals and bow out. And like, we'd go into next year thinking like, well, Jokic just won his 3rd MVP and like everybody's still here. So, no real concerns there. But at the same time, like if you should win it and you don't win it, like, that there's some pressure there. It can only be one of the top 2 tiers for them just because they're so good and they should be expected to win it. There's just like the like disaster potential is not there, which is weird. I want to put them in the A tier. I don't want to put them up there with Boston and the Bucks and Clippers and Suns. I don't know why. Does that seem crazy?
No. And look, part of it is because they're so good and they just won. So that does alleviate some of the pressure. And the other thing is, what did you want them to do to better cement their odds this year? And now this is where you get into, well, they are trying sort of the 2 timeline thing. But what was the trade? They couldn't bring back Bruce Brown. That was just financially, they weren't allowed to do it. And then what was the trade? Because you could suggest, well, if they would have used some of their first, like rather than trying to get off these salaries or part of these smaller deals, if they would have traded distant first for actual players, where are you getting your matching salary from? It would have been from one of your 5 most important players who should be deemed untouchable. There's a level of pressure there just because you have the best player in the NBA. You're getting to a point where you have to reinvest in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope again after this year, who has a player option. And you have to start thinking about, well, what do we do like Aaron Gordon on his next contract, and then with Jamal Murray, and then even like we know what the deal is going to be with Jokic. So there's the level of pressure there, but I don't think it's any more urgent than other contenders at this moment. And like I think next season, if they come out flat or if they were bounced early in the playoffs, or even if they get bounced really early this year, that's when you can start to question leading into next season of, well, like, do they continue down this path of trying to make sure that they have this open-ended timeline thanks to Christian Brown and Peyton Watson and Julian Strother. So that's still kind of up for debate, but they've been so good this year against some of the top end teams. I'm with you that they're out of A tier in respect, but I would even put them in the B tier just because if they lose in the first round, I might still, if they're going to keep their top 5 guys, I'm just going to pick them to win the title again next year.
They're so stable in a way that distinguishes them from really everybody in both of the top 2 tiers. Yeah. So I think we got to leave them in A, but there's a case for B.
Here's one for you. I think this is an easy one. Well, maybe not. The Indiana Pacers.
I would put them in the C tier, next to the Bulls and the Rockets.
Even after giving up multiple first round picks to get Siakam.
I think they're just going to pay whatever the hell it takes to keep him because they have to. And so like, I guess if you're really worried that they might have just set those picks on fire and they aren't going to keep him, you could move him up. But like you have Tyrese Halliburton. He emerged when healthy this year as like an all NBA first teamer potentially. He was way up in the MVP voting before he hurt the hamstring. He's looked better lately. I think everybody agrees Rick Carlisle's a good coach. They have a bunch of like nice depth pieces, your Neesmiths, your Nemhards, like your Jalen Smith. Like they just like, I think next year, if they stay healthy, the expectation should be that they're going to fight for a top 4 seed. Potentially they're going to need defensive help and some organic growth, but like, this doesn't feel like an urgent, we got to do it this year. There's nothing other than Siakam walking, which I just don't think is going to happen. You wouldn't have traded for him if that were a real possibility.
Given how he lit up the other night with how Jarris Walker played, I'm just assuming he wants to have his statue in Indy. The other thing too is of the picks they gave up, there's just like the one of them where the 2026 one is the one where it's a little bit iffy. And then also, to borrow the phrasing that you used, they still have outs because they still have future first. If you wanted to, you can move Walker. You have Benedict Matthew. We're probably up his stock a little bit this season. I think CT, I thought about them as a B tier team, but this was never supposed to be the year. It's supposed to set them up for maybe next year or the year after to be the year. And that's when you talk about them under more pressure.
And talk about outs. God knows every team in the world wants a Miles Turner type. So you can always move Miles Turner. All right. That's a good one. What do you think about the Sixers?
So this is going to, I would argue that they belong in the C tier. And
I would agree.
Okay, good. So it's, yes, you're on the Joel Embiid timeline, but we know he's going to come back from the meniscus injury. You just can't reasonably expect him to be the Joel Embiid that he was leading before the meniscus injury, and that you're just a contender again. And the other thing here is that, yes, you did trade for Buddy Hield, but like you set your books up so that you could go all in ahead of next season.
Right.
So that this clearly wasn't the season, especially, in most cases, you can make jokes about how James Harden team trajectories pan out. In most cases, you're not going to trade James Harden and then expect to be under pressure to win a title that season. The Sixers were unique in that scenario because unlike the Rockets, unlike the Nets, they were still kind of expected to contend because of the leap that Tyrese Maxey made in when you had Embiid healthy. The fact that you don't have Embiid healthy and that you've telegraphed, hey, we want to use our cap space, probably not in free agency, but on the trade market. And maybe it is free agency if Paul George decides to walk. I really think that, no, you're not dealing with found money because just, I don't want to say punting on a year of Joel Embiid's prime because part of the reason you're missing out on it is he was injured. There's urgency there, but you haven't, like, if he wasn't injured, then maybe this would be a different discussion.
And just, you said it, but like having 1 foot in this year because of Joel Embiid's prime and 1 foot in, let's clear as much room as possible for maximum flexibility for next year. It's like, by definition, all your eggs are not in this basket. Like you've got 2 distinct baskets and now like you're focusing on the more distant one. Like that's a terribly mixed metaphor. But you get the idea.
I am ready to do the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay.
And I want to put them in the C tier. Is that insulting?
No, I think you could make a case that they belong in the lower tier than that, but we just can't do that because so like you know how every so often Kirk Goldsberry I think will put up like team efficiency rankings in like quadrants, right? And it's like what
Yeah.
stands out. The Thunder are by far they're like in their own quadrant in terms of like maximum championship potential, minimum pressure. So they're like all the way to either the top right or the bottom left, depending on how it's set up in those kind of graphical illustrations. Because like they could make the finals and nobody would be upset if they lost in the first round because the only thing that changes next year is all their best players get a year older and they're and better.
And so I'm with everything you said. The only thing I'd add is even if this ends in disaster, which disaster means having a top 3 record when no one was really even smashing your over at the start of the season, is you have the information necessary to say, well, this is what we need. And now the pressure's on to go out and get it. But there's no pressure to getting to that point because you want to have that information. I'm not
Not
saying
only
Sam
do you have
Presti's
the
rooting for his team
information,
to lose, but like Sam Presti's going to find value because this team is so malleable moving forward with its picks, with the players, the salaries they have on their roster, the prospects. They can move in so many different directions that they're going to value the resolution to this season, whatever it is.
right? And it's just like you talking about outs. Like they got 9 innings worth of them. Like they have 27 first round picks. You know, it's just it's ridiculous. Like so they'll be able to identify what they need, and what they need honestly might just be more experience, and that'd be fine. But if it's a certain type of player, like no one's more equipped to just go out and make it happen. Like you'll know what you need, and you'll have more means to get it than anyone else in the league. So
there are like maybe 3 teams that have the assets necessary to create their own trade market. And what I mean by that is just going out and getting a player who's not readily or even considered
right.
available because they have the ability to make that type of offer. There's OKC and there's probably Utah. And then like I think you could throw the Pelicans in there when you're dealing with if they wanted to include some of their actual players, but I don't know that there's another team that would fit under that umbrella.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah, that's. I was wondering what you're going to do with them. I think that's the right decision. Okay, well, you said the Pelicans. Let's do them. I feel like they got to be no lower than B. You're hovering around A. You think there's that much pressure on them?
Well, at some point, it's just like haven't we like what? It's not have we seen this movie before? Can we get to see this movie actually?
Can we get through the preview?
Which is healthy Zion, healthy Brandon Ingram in the actual playoffs. I think it needs to be A because it's just like we talk about, okay, we know this team's identity is best with point Zion. We know that it can mesh with Brandon Ingram. We've seen it before his knee injury, but are we ever going to get a chance to actually see it? And you also have Jonas Valanciunas entering free agency. You're starting to get to the point where no, this team is, I don't think they've ever paid the tax. And now if you want to get better or even retain your talent, you might have to start paying the tax, if not next season, and certainly the season after. And then you're dealing with, well, what is Brandon Ingram worth to us on his next contract? And oh, Trey Murphy's next contract is going to be coming up as well. I think they're under a ton of pressure. And part of it's almost the antithesis of some of these other teams where it's we just don't have enough information about like what they are operating as currently constructed at their peak because it's never sustained long enough. But you're also running out of time to just say, well, we can just wait. And so, like they're not the Thunder. Like they've waited out this core long enough to where if they one can't even get to see their best shot, or two just see that their best shot isn't enough, there's like they're gonna have to start asking some awkward wholesale questions.
Yeah, I think they're so young that I mean, it makes it feel a little weird to put them up this high, but we've been asking, well, what about the Zion Ingram fit for like 3 years now? Like, we're not sure about that. And like the fact that they've been so good lately just sort of starts to kindle some hopes that like, oh man, they might be. I think JJ Redick said he liked them to come out of the West potentially, or like make the conference final. Like there's definitely like enough hype now that we sort of have created some artificial like pressure. You know, there's organic pressure, but now we've added some.
Right. Yeah. And it's also it's a different type of pressure to where it's like I guess similar to the Knicks, except I think because the Pelicans have dealt with this, like they've had this core in place a little bit longer. You're going to be, if the Knicks get bounced in the first round, let's say, people are going to push for them. Okay, this has to be the summer they make the blockbuster trade. The Pelicans, I think, will be under that same pressure, but theirs is more complicated because I don't know that there's when you look at how good their players are, it's okay, well, you could say, well, you need to upgrade the CJ McCollum lineup spot. Maybe not that position necessarily, or the Jonas Valanciunas spot. Well, with who is it worth to upgrade from? And so that makes what they're doing, depending on how the season ends, a lot more difficult.
Yeah. Let's pick an easier one. Let's do Orlando next. I feel like they belong next to OKC in the
Yeah,
second to
and it's
lowest
just
pressure.
like we know their defense is going to be for real, and we know what they need on the offensive end. And so they're almost, honestly, among all these teams, maybe the Rockets, but like I think you could make the easiest case for the Magic to be in the D tier, just
Yeah.
because they haven't even tried. They haven't gone out and spent a ton of money, long-term money in free agency. They haven't tried to make some big trade. And so it's just like they might have home court advantage through this. And it's not an insult. It's if they get bounced in the first round, I think that'll be the expectation no matter where they end up, quite frankly.
Right. I feel like if Orlando takes a team to 6 in the first round, everybody's going to be like, "Oh, awesome. Look out next year." There will be no disappointment, I don't think.
Are you ready for a harder team?
These all three of the ones that are left are tough.
Well, you know what? I'm going to make a case for the Heat needing to be in the S tier.
Oh, wow. I thought we were done with the S tier.
Here's the thing is that you could look at it and say, well, they've been so banged up. And like, if they're going to get in through the play-in, and we've seen them make these conference finals and NBA finals pushes, at some point, not finishing in the top 6 of the conference is an indictment of the way that you have built your team. Like the fact that you need to go through that entire stretch of postseason to reach the finals. And the other thing here, which I think adds pressure, is they kind of decided, oh, we're not going to hold out, or we don't have the ammunition for a star trade. So we're going to trade a distant first round pick to get Terry Rozier, who is maybe like, I'm not exactly, but like, that's kind of like when you say maybe he's the 50th best player in the NBA. Like, that's just a very, I don't want to say maybe it ends up panning out. Otherwise, it's an uninspiring move. And so now you've hamstrung your trade assets even more. The fact that you unearthed Jaime Jaquez is great. But like, what is Caleb Martin's next contract going to look like? Jimmy Butler's not getting any younger. What is Tyler Hero's value to this team long-term or as a trade asset? No, look, he's injured as well. And Duncan Robinson looks like a bargain, but oh, he's hurt again too. So this team is just, even if you want to focus on the Jimmy Butler timeline, you're just, you can't play the Heat culture card forever. And I'll shut my mouth for good if they make the NBA finals again while backing their way into the play-in. But like, do you even expect them to catch the Pacers at this point to be with a top 6 spot? And so if you're going to constantly be in this position to where you're not a top 6 team in your conference, and yet you don't have the assets to go out and get a star, you have one young star, but, and I guess, Tyler Hero's young, Jaime Jaquez is young. So you have outs, but the player who drives everything, who is one of the 5 to 7 most valuable players come playoff time, that dude is getting into his mid and late 30s. You're just running out of time. And now you decided that, oh, we're actually not going to chase that. We're okay trading a distant first round pick in a non-blockbuster. And so I do think you've now inherently increased the pressure factor for yourself. Whereas if they didn't make that trade, Grant, I think based on the injuries, I would have said that they could have been like an A or B tier team.
Yeah, I think you talked me into it. It's still they're the shakiest of the top tier, but it would feel weird to put them in the same tier as like Denver and like a couple teams that might not even make the play-in, or well, at least one in the Warriors. So I'm good with that. Okay, all these teams, the last 2 are still difficult. Let's do Cleveland, and this is a case where you got to weigh whether the injuries are cover or if it's like. And the fact that like not your 2 best players, but certainly 2 of your 4 best players are still in their early 20s in Mobley and Garland, and like Jared Allen's on a good we cannot put Cleveland in the top tier. I'm vacillating between the middle tier, the B tier, and the A tier.
I don't know what to do with them, just because the samples are all sorts of fucked up because of all the injuries they dealt with.
Like, so what to you would be an unqualified disappointment in terms of their playoff fate this year?
They pull the Orlando Magic in round 1, get stifled by their defense, and lose.
Right? Which is what happened last year when they were healthier. So it's like, I don't know. I think the
only reason to put them in the A tier would be, do you think that a first round exit would result in a referendum on Donovan Mitchell wanting to be there? I'm not ready to go there just because I haven't seen any signals privately, publicly that seems like he's unhappy. And even if he was unhappy or on the fence, like you just still have him you could see this through if you
Yeah.
really wanted to and decide what to do at next year's trade deadline. So my gut says B tier just because of all the injuries. I do if you feel strongly about the Donovan Mitchell factor though, I
Well,
totally get the A tier argument.
what's interesting is I don't know which way the Donovan Mitchell factor cuts, or I don't think the Donovan Mitchell factor cuts any direction. Because if you're, I kind of would go the other way with like, I don't think, I think he's gonna leave or tell them he wants to be traded regardless of what happened. Not necessarily
Oh
like,
wow.
oh, not on July 1 or whatever. I just think the way that at some point he will either his contract will expire or he will before that say like, yeah, New York, one or the other, just or Miami, something. So and like I think that's going to be my opinion on it, whether they get bounced in the first round or whether they make the conference finals. So let's go B tier. I don't think that weighs too heavily.
And the other
Last
thing is just like even they just get bounced in the first round, you're still left with these top 4 guys
Yeah,
who are so good. And then Garland and Mobley have not even hit their primes yet. And I know
right.
Garland's had some weird stuff going on this season, and will he ever be a good finisher? Yada yada yada. They're just still in a really good position, even though they're it's hard to upgrade this roster, but they're not expensive to the point yet where they're not going to have some spending tools in free
Okay.
agency.
Yeah, I'm with it.
That
Okay,
leaves the Mavericks, which
it
is
does. I think I
where would
want
you
to put
put
him
them?
in the S tier. I think I want to put him all the way up.
I look, you gave me the Heat, so I'll give you the Mavs. I would argue that you know what? They did trade like first round picks at the deadline, so
They
they'll open up
did.
some stuff. Yeah.
They burned the picks. I think, you'd be a fool not to at least think. You probably would. You don't need to fixate on it as much as I do, but you got to at least think about the Luka Doncic like satisfaction index. We're doing the pressure index, but like if they get eliminated in the first round, that you're still going to ask all these questions like, what do we put around this guy and how long is he going to put up with this? And they got again, the word of the day is outs. Like they're running out of them. They've
They
burned
still
some
have
picks
some.
on middling moves. They do have some, but they don't have as many as they used to.
Right. Yeah, I could see the case for what's tough with them is that, and I think it's the same with the Heat, is that the other 4 teams, the Bucks, the Celtics, the Clippers, and the Suns, it'll be inexcusable if they get bounced in the first round. And you can even say, well, what if Phoenix pulls like a really like the Nuggets in the first round? It's like, well, then Phoenix should have won more fucking regular season games to avoid that. Whereas the Mavericks, it's just sort of like they were at the talent deficit. The matchup could be really difficult. Could you see at least them thinking we did remake our roster a little bit midseason? Yeah, sure, we lost, but we pushed whatever team we faced in the first round to 6 or 7 games and it was competitive. I think that is, I'm leaving them in the S tier. Just because when the stakes, you're
Well,
dealing with Luka Doncic, who's one of the 5 best players in basketball, the stakes are so high on any given season. But I think I've seen enough signs of progress with him and Kyrie Irving, and to at least like, okay, well, you have something in the front court that I could understand the argument for the A tier, but it's just, I
yeah, I don't want you to give it to me just because I conceded on the Heat. I'm kind of arguing against myself.
so
I want like an
here
in
would be why
between
the
tier.
pressure is not as high because Luka Doncic is good enough to where you see it through until the end of his contract, even if he at some point decides not to sign an extension. And we know that that's not going to be an issue for at least another year. And so,
Yeah.
like, I'm wondering if that detracts from the pressure at all here.
You
But
know
again,
what?
they have, as you've said, some picks will open up for them to trade moving forward, but they still just have so few outs to where no, they're not locked into this core. But what are you moving aside from what little first round equity you have left to go and make that needle nudging trade? I understand the case. They have to be in one of the top 2 tiers. Let me make that clear. But
For
I
sure. I wonder though, like we focused a lot on like the last best shot thing. It doesn't feel like their last best shot just because, like you
no.
said, they're gonna have Luka for as long as it's possible to have Luka. So maybe let's bump them down. They can't go lower than that, but I think I like the look of the 5 teams we have in the top tier in Dallas because Luka is there. Like, I guess if you really think he will not be there if this goes badly, then they have to move up. But they're not going to trade. If he demanded a trade, imagine what you'd get for him. Like,
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess yeah, I think we've got it right there. They're not quite maximum pressure.
So quickly to wrap this up, which team is under the single most pressure entering the 2024 playoffs? We
I
know it's either the Heat, the Celtics, the Bucks, the Clippers, or the Suns based on our tiers.
Yeah, I rule the Celtics out because they could just run it back with no problem. I rule the Heat out because I don't think their expectations are quite as high.
Yeah.
I think I probably gotta. I think it's Phoenix, just because like there's no second option. Like this is just you gotta. Kevin Durant's going to be a year older next year. This you're not that like it would be a shock if they won a title to me, but like that is the expectation, and that is sort of what the way they put their roster together demands they do. So I feel like Phoenix is the highest pressure. What do you think?
I would agree with you there. And it's also just if you were looking at kind of breaking up the top of the roster, they have more outs because it's like if they have to sign and trade Paul George, there might be a worse team, but they're still going to get a lot of value for him. Where it's like, what would the value be in a Kevin Durant or Bradley Beal trade, the latter of whom has a no trade clause right now? And if
Yeah,
Devin Booker requests out, that's just an abject
yeah,
disaster. So
you're
yeah, I think
done if he wants
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're absolutely done. We're on to stat pad and guess a player. We're gonna keep this short because we're pressed for time. So we'll do each of us will get two. Do you wanna start us off?
Yes, I have a guess a player for you from Rubik's Gal here. Uh, Clue number one: Kevon Looney wishes he could be me.
Uh is this can I yeah, no, clue number two. I
Yeah.
have no Kevon Looney
Clue
wishes Trace Jackson Davis? We're gonna start naming players who
yeah, right. Guys that are playing ahead of him. Clue number two: I made only 8 threes in my career in 83 attempts, but the longest was when I took a heave from the opposing free throw line in my final game and rattled it in. I didn't remember that.
final game and rattled it in. So I'm thinking I'm assuming he's gotta be a big guy at this point, just based off those clues. I got
I will
Jared
give you
Jack.
nothing. No, that's my facial expression trying to give away nothing. Clue number three: I was the first basketball player to turn pro immediately after high school.
The first basketball player to turn pro immediately after. I already know I'm not going to get this one.
You might get it. All right. Clue number four: I am the only NBA player to win the MVP award in consecutive years with different teams. So back-to-back MVPs, but change teams. Only Barry Bonds has ever replicated this in any of the other 4 major American pro sports. I'm also a lot of information in this clue. The MVP with the fewest assists per game in an MVP season, under 2 assists per game.
God. So it's a multi-time MVP. Is it
Not
Bill
too many of
Russell?
those. No, it is not Bill Russell.
Charles Barkley? Did he win 2 MVPs? Did he even win an MVP?
I think he won it in Phoenix. It's not Charles Barkley.
Okay, and I don't know why I said 2 different teams. I forgot about that clue. I don't know why I would have went with Bill Russell there. Yeah, keep going. I got nothing.
All right. Clue 5. I made 8 all NBA teams and 2 all defense teams. Don't worry, I played more than 65 games each time. And my jersey has been retired by 2 NBA teams.
I feel like I should know this. I still have. He's a multi-time MVP that I'm not like. I should just start naming MVPs that I know have won multiple ones. Why
I
can't I?
I will say this is one of those guys that's like in a weird period in NBA history for me that like I don't think I remembered the 2 MVPs for different teams, but it's like it's in a weird like I don't know like gray section of NBA history. I can give you the 6th and final clue here.
Yes, please.
I famously predicted the outcome of the playoffs in my MVP season with the new team, so second MVP season. We dropped just 1 game more than I said we would, which was none. So he said we're not going to lose any games. And that year's championship rings were inscribed "Faux Fi Faux." You have to know what he actually predicted. Uh,
I have no idea.
okay. So do you remember? So probably not, but he predicted going into the playoffs, like how the playoff series go. He said foe, like as in 4 wins, 4 wins, 4 wins for all 3 playoff series. I am the chair. Give up.
Yeah.
I am the chairman of the boards and NBA champion and Finals MVP, Moses Malone.
Ah, that was a good one.
It's
All
just
right.
one that like you see
Yeah, I didn't
whenever
know
you see
I
all the
did not know
rebound
he won.
records and
I didn't know he won multiple MVPs.
yeah, that's good trivia.
All right, I have Be Rich for you. Clue 1. I was a lottery pick in the early 90s and traded on draft night, then made the all-rookie team.
Ooh, lottery pick, early 90s, traded on draft night, made the all rookie team. Okay. Next clue, please.
Clue number 2. In my next 4 seasons, I was an all-star each year and made 3 all-NBA squads.
Early 90s lottery pick traded and then is just awesome right away. I wish I knew the year. Early 90s is so tricky. Who was a lottery pick in the early 90s? You said he was on all NBA teams too, in addition to All Stars.
So, yeah, in the next 4 seasons, he was an all-star 4 times and made all-NBA 3 times.
Jesus Christ. So like in his second, third, fourth years. All right, I don't have it.
Clue 3. In the 97 playoffs, I became the first player ever to drop back-to-back 40-plus point games in which my team scored fewer than 100 points. I did this against Pat Riley's Heat, by the way.
So it's a Knicks guy. It's not Larry Johnson.
It is not Larry Johnson.
Oh, that's not a terrible guess. And it's not Alonzo. Is it Alonzo Mourning?
It is not Alonzo Mourning. Alonzo, the clue would have been if he dropped 40 points against Pat Riley's Heat. Alonzo Mourning was on Pat Riley's Heat.
Oh, I was thinking Knicks. Oh, well, then Larry Johnson was also a stupid guess. Okay. It's against Pat Riley's Heat in 97. God damn it. All right. What's the next clue?
In 1999, I was traded for 2 first-round picks to the Western Conference, winning 50-plus games on a team with 6 players averaging 10-plus points per game, including the immortal Clifford Robinson.
Cliff Robinson in 99. So where's Cliff Robinson in 99? It's got to be, is that Portland or is that Phoenix? Who's getting all these 40-pointers? Traded on draft night, early 90s. Oh, I'm blanking. It's too late. It's too late for my brain. How many more clues do I have?
2.
Okay, let's hear them.
Clue 5. In 2003, I was traded with Steph Marbury for cap filler, including Howard Isley and Antonio McDyess, and 2 first-round picks back to the Eastern Conference, where I disappointed due to continuing injuries that plagued my career. If I could say so myself, I would have been a surefire Hall of Famer had I not had roughly 350 knee surgeries.
Oh, is this Penny Hardaway?
It is. Nice job. Final clue was Chris Rock was my little pal.
Okay. I always appreciate, I'm definitely going to get it with I like the last clue being like a very sporting, like, here you go. You'll get it on this one. Okay. Oh, Penny Hardaway. All right. I got one from Mike.
He has a segment. We need to go more in depth with it. Should we each do the
Oh,
is
yeah,
Bill Walton talking about? We'll do one of each of those.
Yeah, I totally forgot about the Bill Walton stuff. we have to do that. Okay, hold on. Let me get down to it. All right, so the bit here is, who is Bill Walton talking about? And you're gonna get the choices don't even matter. All right. These are all things Bill Walton said. I'm going to trust that Mike has fact checked these. And actually, I don't care if they're made up because they're so good. All right. Well, number 1, a thing of beauty. Einstein, Da Vinci, Jobs, and now Tyreek Evans, Stromile Swift, Nate Robinson, Tony Parker, or Andre Miller?
Ooh, Tony Parker.
It's Tyreek Evans for some reason. All right. Blank looked like Dr. J there. Greg Buckner. Thank you, Mike. Kerry Kittles, Sean Kemp, Sean Bradley, Joe Smith.
We read it back one more time.
Blank looked like Dr. J there. You have Greg Buckner, Kerry Kittles, Sean Kemp, Sean Bradley, Joe Smith.
Sean Bradley.
You are correct. What did he do? Well, I wonder what Sean Bradley did.
Yeah, we need to find that highlight.
3. Blank is one of the finest centers in the history of Western civilization. Presumably, there were finer centers in Eastern civilization. Arvydas Sabonis, Dale Davis, Donald Foyle, Greg Ostertag, Eric Dampier.
Please let it be Eric Dampier.
No, it's Greg Ostertag. Oh, that's just number 4. This game should be a blowout. The Lakers have absolutely no way to defend the power that is blank. Sean Kemp, Boris Diaw, Anthony Randolph, Adonal Foyle, second appearance for Adonal Foyle, Keith Kloss.
Adonal Foyle.
It is Keith Kloss. Fun fact, Keith Kloss scored 12 points in this game. His career high is 15. Last one. Blank should be playing a minimum of 45 minutes every game. Josh Hart and Miles McBride are the correct answer. Samuel Dallenberg, Keon Clark, Mike Dunleavy Jr., Corey Maggette, Ruben Patterson.
Keon Clark.
It's Corey Maggette. A minimum of 45 minutes. That's all. Oh, those are so fun.
Yeah.
God, those are good.
He's got 6 for you. I'm going to split them up so that we could save some of them because this bit is Mikey's. Feel free to add more of them. But who is Bill Walton talking about, Grant? The only man who can stop blank is himself. The man is unstoppable, even at 38. LeBron James, Karl Malone, Arvydas Sabonis, Cliff Robinson, or Zydrunas Ilgauskas?
Please be Cliff Robinson.
That is correct. Nice job. Who is Bill Walton talking about? You look at blank. This guy is cut from stone. It's as if Michelangelo were reading and a lightning bolt flashed before him. Ron Artest, Gary Payton, Vladimir Radmanovic, Karan Butler, or Nikola Pekovic?
Oh, I have to pick Vladimir Radmanovic.
You are 2 for 2.
I understand Bill Walton. I think I get it.
All right, the third one, and it'll be our last one. Yesterday, we celebrated Sir Isaac Newton's discovery of gravity. Today, blank is defying it. Is he talking about Vince Carter, Desmond Mason, Brendan Haywood, Gerald Green, or Fabricio Alberto?
Oh, I'm going to go against what's been working and not say Fabricio Alberto. I'm going to say Gerald Green.
You should have went with your gut. It's Fabricio Alberto.
Oh, that's so great. That's such a better answer.
That was a great idea, Mike. Thank you for that. Grant, would you like to take us out of here?
Oh, I sure would. This is going to be the greatest outro in the history of Western civilization. This will be the Greg Ostertag of outros. Thank you, everyone, specifically for your contributions to stat padding. I just never knew I needed so much Bill Walton in my life. Please, as always, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies, spread the news, let everybody know you're listening to Hardwood Knocks and that you like it or that you hate it, but make sure that other people listen to it. That's kind of the goal here. You can join our Discord, which is where we get a lot of our stat padding suggestions and guest players and have good conversations, live game campfires. Everybody likes to just talk about what they're watching, and we have great discussions all over the place there. Link to do that is in the YouTube and podcast descriptions, as is a link to our merch. And I think that's going to cover it. Thanks again. Shout out Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.